Anderson. I'm the chair of the Lyon County Democratic Party, and I want to thank you all very much for attending today's town hall. I am happy to be the moderator of today's event, and I'd like to take a brief moment to thank ESU for allowing us this venue. It's historic, it's very picturesque, and it's nice as chair to come to an event that you didn't have to set up. That was pleasant. I got here a little bit early and was pleasantly surprised. Now, it seems like 2016 was really just yesterday. It seems like we just had an election, but election season is coming. August and November are going to be here faster than we know it, and there is no better way for you as a voter to know who you're going to support, what direction you want to take the state in, and which one of these candidates is going to champion your values and what's important to you than just coming here and talking to them. So that's the idea of today's town hall. Just to go over the rules real quick, I don't want to take too much time because you didn't come here to hear me. Each candidate will be given a 3-minute opening statement, and then we will open the floor for questions. Each candidate will be granted a 2-minute response. We will have a timekeeper. Lillian, our timekeeper over here, will hold our candidate's feet to the fire. So she's got a red stop card too. She's going to wave at him when it's time up. In the event that a candidate is asked a direct question that's really just about them and maybe a position they've taken or an issue that's kind of singular about them, all the other candidates are still going to be able to respond for 2 minutes to that topic. Okay, that way we have equal time. And then at about probably 12:40, 12:45, I'm going to close the floor for questions, and then each candidate will be granted a 3-minute closing statement. At that point, the event will conclude. But I want to turn our attention now to our guests and Democratic candidates for governor. I would like to thank and welcome State Senator Laura Kelly, House Minority Leader Jim Moore, former Mayor of Wichita, Carl Brewer, Raphael Spotty of Ellsworth, Kansas, and Dr. Arden Anderson from my hometown, Leavenworth. Robert Klingenberg of Salina was invited, but he was unable to attend. Mr. Bergeson, young Mr. Bergeson, sent me a note about the same time I got one from Mr. Brewer's campaign that he was running a little bit late, so I anticipate he'll walk in here before opening statements get to his end of the table. But with that said, I will invite Senator Kelly to begin, and we're just going to go down the line, and then we're going to ping pong back and forth for questions. I'll give you this one.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. It is great to be in Hornetland. And I really want to thank the Lyon County Democrats for putting this forum together. I am Laura Kelly. I'm a state senator from Topeka. I grew up in a military family, so as a child I moved around a lot. I lived in Asia, I lived in Europe, I lived all across the United States. When I got to a certain age and I got married and I had kids, my husband and I decided we really wanted to find a permanent home, a place where we could stay forever, and we thought long and hard about it, and we chose to move to Kansas. We chose Kansas specifically because of what it had to offer young families like mine. Great schools that were public, didn't have to do private, great job opportunities, and that real sense of community that after having traveled all around the world, that was really important to me. We first actually lived in Salina, and in Salina I had a position, I was the first executive director of the Kansas Recreation and Park Association. So in the 18 years I held that position, I traveled all over the state of Kansas. I've been in small towns, large towns, rural, urban, small. I got to know Kansas very well during those travels, and I came to really love my adopted state and the people who live here. In 2004, I ran for the Senate. It was the first elected position I tried for. I won by a grand total of 100 votes. I had to put all in. I was taking out an incumbent, but I did that because I felt it really important that my constituents in particular have somebody who more represented their views than the person who was in the office at the time. I got to work right away, working on behalf of Kansas kids, Kansas families. And during my time in the Senate, I think I've been recognized for my ability to really deliver results for the people of Kansas. I fought for the same things that brought me to Kansas. I've been fighting for our schools. I've been fighting for jobs, to create a thriving community, and to make sure that our communities are safe. Ultimately, and unfortunately, as most of you know, the past 7 years, those things have been put at great risk. On unfortunate side, however, in 2016, we had an election that brought a wave of new faces into the legislature on the mandate from the voters to fix the problems that had been created by the Brown-Collier experiment. So we have worked together in a very bipartisan way, and we have started to turn this ship around, but we still have a very, very long way to go. Candidates on the Republican side likely to come out, Jeff Collier and Chris Kobach, are both in a position of wanting to take us backwards. Jeff Collier has been Brownback's loyal number 2 for 7 years, never objecting to any of the reckless policies that he put in place. We also must remember that he is the architect of the disastrous CanCare program that has hurt our elderly, hurt our disabled, and hurt our children. I don't need to tell you about Chris Kobach. If we think Brownback's bad, we just need to experience Kobach. He is already on record that he wants to take us back to the Brownback tax experience. And that goes quickly.
Sorry. I'm going to stand up because I've been sitting in the car for a couple of hours. My name is Jim Ward. I have the privilege of being the House Democratic leader for the last year and a half. I hail from Wichita. I am running to re-energize and renew the Kansas economy, to build partnerships with business and academics and labor, to renew the idea that the economy should work for all of us, not the rich corporations like it has for the last 7 years. And it means real ideas, like, for example, I go around this state, have toured this state for the last 15 years. I hear over and over employers saying, I need qualified, good employees. I talk to kids coming out of college or technical school who says, I want to go to work in Kansas. I've got to believe a governor can be that bridge between employers who need those jobs and the kids who need it. We need to change the idea. We're standing in Emporia State, which has started as a teacher's college, now has a very robust nursing program. We have a great program in Emporia, but it's not the only way to get education. We need to re-energize technical education, so we need welders and plumbers and electricians, and those are a good way to make a living. And we need to make sure the economy works for those families. That means an investment in education across the board. We need to expand Medicaid, because you can't do any work if you're not healthy. We need to make sure that telemedicine happens across this state so that the experts and technical people can reach out to Colby and to Pratt and to make sure that in this state you can go to the doctor regardless of how much money you make. That shouldn't be a bar. And finally, the critical piece that Kansas has in our economy that has always been the case, which is people who go to work in Kansas will give you a good day's work, fair day's work, if you give them good, fair day's pay. We've educated workforce that's trainable and adaptable to the world as it changes over and over again. And we've got away from that. The current administration, our Department of Commerce, which is the people that we hire to sell Kansas both here in this country and internationally, used it like a piggy bank. We can do better. And what the other thing we have to ask is, as Senator Kelly says, Chris Kobach is going to be the Republican nominee. Chris Kobach he said, the biggest thing that Chris Kobach said in the last year that stuck in my mind, he said, Sam Brownback's biggest mistake was that he did not go far enough. So we have to ask two questions of the people sitting at this table. One, who has the aspirations to make the better Kansas? And two, who can beat Chris Kobach? I'm here to tell you, I can beat Chris Kobach. And that I have a vision that not only started last month or last 2 months ago when I decided to run for governor, but it's been over 15 years of public service. I ask for your help. I ask for your vote. My name is Jim Ward.
Really? Well, first of all, let me say thank you for hosting this today. I'm Carl Brewer, and I'm the former mayor of the city of Wichita, and was a two-term mayor. Was the only Democrat that's ever served 2 terms in the city of Wichita, and the only second mayor that's ever served 2 consecutive terms in the largest city in the state of Kansas. I'm married with 4 children, 13 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren. First generation Kansan. My family moved here from Oklahoma. My grandfather moved his family here. They were sharecroppers in the southern part of Oklahoma. He's looking for a better life, better opportunities, and he moved his entire family here. He worked in the meatpacking industry. At a very young age, I started working in the meatpacking industry and doing that and going to school during the day, and just to be able to help to support my brothers and sisters, my siblings. And so with that being said, I certainly understand the history of the state of Kansas and certainly the history of Wichita. I'm retired from the military. I joined the reserves at a young age and retired from there, went through the ranks as a non-commissioned officer, and then went on to officer candidate school and graduated there. I commanded infantry and armored combat units, and then I also worked in corporate America. I started out as a sheet metal assembler, then went on and was working with the labor unions as a sheet metal assembler, representing the employees there under state labor laws, and then went on into management. And most recently, as of last year, I retired from Spirit Aero Systems, which is a subsidiary of the Boeing company itself. And I was in charge of government relations, community relations and government affairs for them. And I made the decision, after getting a chance to watch a lot of the things that were actually going on, that were happening here in our country and also in the state of Kansas, is one, I ended up getting involved when I started out as a city council member, as a community activist, getting involved because my community was not being heard. And nobody was paying attention to what we were saying. So what better way than to go to be at the table and to be able to voice your concerns and the issues that you may have. And so with that being said, that caused me to get involved even more. And I ran for city council, was elected city council. I ran for mayor against the sitting mayor, very conservative sitting mayor, and I beat him 2-1. And with that being said, I ended up getting in there during the worst recession in the history of this country. This is about building Kansas and building us back to where we used to be. And I'm wanting to make sure that individuals and our children don't have to go through what I went through and not having a voice. And I'm wanting to go to be able to represent individuals and be able to give them a voice and give our children a voice, but also someone that's not afraid to define what the vision is and what the goals are, and all of us work collectively together. I've certainly demonstrated that I have been able to cross lines, party lines, and get individuals to work together, not for the party, but what's in the best interest of our communities.
Good morning, I'm Joshua Swati. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank the Lyon County Democratic Party and Emporia State University for hosting. This is actually my 4th time to be here campaigning as a candidate in Lyon County, and it's great to be back. I grew up in Ellsworth County on a farm. We're 5th generation in Ellsworth County. I still farm there, but I split my time between Ellsworth and Topeka, so it was an easy drive down this morning from Topeka to be here with all of you. I want to thank you for coming out. It's a cold, rainy morning on Saturday. I'm sure there are a lot of other things you would rather be doing, but I appreciate the Democrats being here and also even Republicans I see in the room. I appreciate you being here this morning to hear us. And I want to share something. Lyon County is the western frontier. You are the western frontier of the Democratic strategy in Kansas for the last 8 years. In 2014, we had a strong candidate for governor, but we only won 7 counties. And you were the furthest west. And if you know a little bit about Kansas geography, there's actually a lot further west than Lyon County. The other candidates that spoke about this are right. Substantively, there is very little different in most of us up here today. We believe in fighting for schools. We believe in fighting for people that don't have a voice. But we as Democrats cannot be the party of, shucks, we came so close. Especially when we know what is possible coming out of the Republican primary. This is a race we must win. And if we as a party want to be relevant, we can't have a 5, 6, or 7 county strategy. We have to have a 105 county strategy. We have to compete everywhere across the state because we know that some of the biggest counties in the state are historically always going to split about 50-50 no matter how much money, how much time, and how much energy we spend there. And inevitably, Democrats head into western Kansas and they lose 75-25 or 80-20. And I would submit to you this morning, and I hope as we go throughout this forum you'll pick up on it, I am the candidate in part because of where I'm from, in part because I have family in 34 counties, most of them in western Kansas, And in part in the way that I campaign, I'm the only candidate, Republican or Democrat, that's been to all 105 counties campaigning. I'm the only candidate that can absolutely compete in areas that Democrats have historically been underperforming in for years. And we have to do it if we're going to win in November. Thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm Arden Anderson, and I have a little bit of a list today because I had surgery this week, and so it gave me a whole new appreciation of what it's like for people that suffer with speech impediments. So just bear with me, please. I am a colonel in the Air Force Reserves, and I've been deployed 3 times. I'm also a primary care physician, as well as a former teacher, as well as I am a farmer. And the reason I'm running for governor is because I actually have the experience in every one of these issues to actually make changes. Like many Kansans, and like many people across the United States, I'm tired of the same old political talking points. And nobody is actually coming up with real solutions. Real solutions to gun safety. Real solutions to health care. People want to talk about, well, we'll just expand it. It's a bankrupting system. I practice family practice medicine. 1/3 of my patients are Medicaid, Medicare. I have some people that are actually homeless. I work with this every single day. I know what needs to be changed. And expanding without first overhauling is only going to raise our deficit. It is not going to extend care to more people. It's going to put more money into large corporations out of the state of Kansas. Education. No question, we have to better pay teachers. I've been in a classroom. I know what it's like to put various different lesson plans together, deal with various different children. But one thing that nobody's talking about and nobody really understands, back when I started back in the 80s teaching school, we didn't have 26% of the children with special needs. We now do. The latest study this year, 26% of our children have special needs. That trend continues to go upwards. No one here knows how to deal with that. I do. I know what the causes are for those things, and I know how to change them because I deal with them every single day in my practice. If we don't address those along with the education formula, because that education formula is going to have to change. 20 years from now, it's estimated nearly 50% of the children will be special needs. Where are we going to get the budget to deal with that? We have to address both the education as well as why are we having such an onslaught of autism, ADD, depression, and suicide. I'm a face that you don't know very well, but I am a governor you'll never regret.
All right, folks, at this point, we are going to open the floor to questions from the audience. So if you have a question, just line up. That's going to be kind of how this goes. Unless you're somebody who is not able to move, just raise your hand, catch my attention. We'll make sure you get your question asked. It seems that my treasurer, Mr. McGough, has the first question. And we're going to start with Mr. Anderson, unless it's directed at a single candidate. It's going to.
Actually, my question is mainly directed at Senator Kelly, but I welcome responses from the others as well. Can you hear me all right? Is this-
Yes.
Hello? Okay. I guess I need to get it up higher here. Our country is very much in need of larger quantities of and better female leadership. And I appreciate a lot of the positions you have. But I do have a conundrum. I also have a personal vow, like many other people, that I will never vote for a candidate who supports the gun lobby. 3 years ago, you voted with the Republican majority to allow unlicensed concealed carry. I would like you to convince me that you've gone 180 degrees and are ready to say no way to the NRA.
I thank you for that question. And indeed, I have been a supporter of Second Amendment rights, and I will continue to be. But the conversation before was very much on issues of things like concealed carry and the right to hunt. The conversation has changed dramatically to our kids being shot in classrooms and assault weapons. Last year, the year before, I voted to ban guns on campus. Last year, I voted to ban guns in our public hospitals, KU, Osawatomie, our community mental health centers, and our adult care facilities. And this year, I'm looking forward to the opportunity to vote for a bill that will keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers, and also one that will allow law enforcement to temporarily take away guns from those who are deemed to be a danger to themselves and others. As governor, I promise that I will bring together law enforcement, mental health professionals, and our educational specialists. And together we will craft common sense gun policy for the state of Kansas.
We're all going to have a say on
Yes,
this.
everyone will have 2 minutes to respond to the comment of the question.
I'm sorry, Senator, times haven't changed. Sandy Hook, where third graders were murdered in their classroom, happened in 2013. Charleston, where a Bible study group was slaughtered in their church. Las Vegas happened just a year ago, where those people, those kids who went to a concert were murdered by a high-powered rifle from a hotel. Times haven't changed. Politicians have. And I hope it's permanent. I hope it's permanent. But one of the things I believe firmly is you can predict behavior in the future by what you've seen in the past. And I believe strongly in 5 things that we can do immediately. Comprehensive background checks. Close the gun show loophole. 2, we should not let people who have domestic violence or mental illness that makes them, not all mental illness should be restricted, but the ones that say, no, this person's not temperamentally enough to take care of a gun. Done. Guns have no place in schools, period. Period. In any way, shape, or form. And let me tell you something. My 2 opponents on the Republican side, Chris Kobach and Jeff Collier, you know what their idea for gun safety in schools is? More guns. They think we should create Wyatt Earp, Dodge City, where teachers are shooting at bad guys and bad guys are shooting back and third graders are diving under desk and in the corner. It's wrong. And I hope that the senator's right and the politicians have finally caught up with what the kids in Florida are saying. Enough is enough is enough. End the body count.
Well, you heard me tell you a while ago that I served in the military for 21 years. And I commanded infantry and armored companies. These are combat units. Every single weapon that the military has to use, I've trained hundreds of soldiers to be able to use them. I know what they're capable of doing. I know the mass destruction that they're designed to do. And today, at no point in time did I ever think that I would see these types of weapons inside my communities. Did I ever think that I would see this type of stuff going on in our schools? We send our children to school to get an education, not to go there and try to be doing like the 10-year-old, trying to figure out how to protect herself. We send them there to get an education so they can go and compete with the rest of the world. We shouldn't have guns in any school, on any campus, at no point in time. And we should make it a priority to make sure that we get rid of all guns on campuses. The craziest idea that somebody can come up with is to tell teachers that they should carry a gun. If soldiers and law enforcement can't accurately hit their target at 100%, then certainly what would make you think that a teacher or someone else could do it? We need more regulations and we need things in place to be able to protect our children and our families and our neighbors. And the accident, when it's an individual, as you're the mayor of the city of Wichita, I've seen where officers have accidentally shot the wrong person. And one, it affects the officer. It affects the person that they didn't intend to shoot. And it affects the entire community. We gotta be smarter about what we're actually doing, and certainly there's no reason that we can't have and adequate gun control laws and things in place and registering individuals being able to do that. But also, secondly, taking it a step farther, we've seen that individuals that can't control their emotions, when they get involved in abuse and the situations of that nature, how they actually end up taking other individuals' lives. They need to be addressed and certainly create an environment where they cannot have weapons. I would certainly force those types of laws back in place.
You know, I think this is an opportunity where we can go to those that would want to continue to expand gun rights and say, you know, there is a way to do this sensibly. I supported conceal and carry in the mid-2000s, but we did it then by requiring licensure and requiring multiple hours of training, which were both very sensible elements. And they were unfortunately stripped then around 6 years later after I was outside of the legislature. But I think that two things, and I am hopeful that we are a part of a movement now that can actually gain traction, but two things that I hope to see happen both here in the state of Kansas and nationally. One, universal background checks. The other thing that I think we absolutely must push for is an end to 30-round clips or 30-round magazines. And I have explained this to other people. We already have regulations in place. A shotgun can hold 7 shells, but if you do upland bird hunting, you only get 3, and no one complains about it. It's fine. It's okay. There is no reason whatsoever that we need to have 30-round magazines. And in my opinion, I think that's one of the reasons that we have problems with such violent shootings. You don't have to reload hardly ever. It gives an opportunity to do maximum amount of damage. And I see that as an opportunity. We have a chance as a country to begin having a different conversation and bringing the people on the right back into the fold by saying there are ways to appropriately regulate this, where your freedoms remain more than intact, but the safety of everyone improves. Because we clearly have a problem. And I also do not think we should arm teachers at all. If any of you are teachers, you don't have to raise your hands, but I'm sure you've had things stolen out of your desk by students at some point in time. And we don't ever want that thing to be stolen to actually be a gun. And you know it would happen if we were arming teachers. So absolutely not advance any more guns into the schools.
I think it's a very interesting discussion that we have, as my colleagues have set up here. People saying that we should arm teachers. As a colonel in the Air Force, as a flight doc, I have to decide who carries and who does not carry. That's my job on the base. And as Carl talked about, we train people to carry weapons. We do not allow people to carry weapons if they are on antidepressants and anxiolytics. If they have a mental health background, they are not allowed to carry. My cousin is a Navy SEAL, and he said, what people don't understand is when you have to pull that trigger and kill somebody, you may think that you can, but that's not going to happen. And particularly the average teacher is not going to be able to do that. What nobody is talking about, yes, we need to get the assault weapons off the street, and I'm a hunter. I've never hunted with an AK-47. I don't have an AK-47. I've never seen any hunters hunt with an AK-47. And we are limited on how big our clip sizes are. And that's not a problem, as Josh says. But nobody is talking about non-lethal force. We need to train teachers and personnel in the classrooms for non-lethal force. This is domestic terrorism, ladies and gentlemen. We have it in this country. Welcome to the rest of the world. But we don't have to have more guns in the classroom. We can have non-lethal force. Tasers, dart guns, and rubber bullets. So if you miss, nobody gets killed. If you've never been in Europe, if you've never been in the Middle East,
Time, Dr. Anderson.
that's a daily occurrence.
All right, and we'll open the floor to the next question. And we'll begin, unless it's directed to a single candidate, with Dr. Anderson.
In the past few years, one of the things that's been eliminated is the food sales tax refund on on food sales tax. So you can no longer get the refund unless you get a refund from your income, so anyone on a fixed income can't get it. My question is are you willing to either push to reinstate the food sales tax refund or just plain eliminate sales tax on food like many other states have done?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. I grew up on a small farm in Michigan, and we don't have sales tax on food. I think it is one of the most unfair and ridiculous taxes to have in our society. Exactly for the reason you say, particularly people, and a number of my patients make less than $1,000 a month. So they have to pay rent, food, clothing, gasoline out of that. The food tax penalizes them. $5 a week makes a huge difference to those people. $10 a week. Whatever we think, that doesn't really matter. What matters is those people that are on the low and fixed income, which are also retired folks. We can find another place to get tax revenue from a portion of society that can afford that. Yes, it's going to have to be slow, as our colleagues have said in the past, Jim Ward and Laura Kelly, because it's slow for the legislature to move, but we need to work 1, 2, 3, 4 years, completely eliminate that sales tax. And certainly, if we can at least do that incrementally, remember we're in Kansas, and so if we can at least do that incrementally, that is going to begin to help people with more money to be able to just purchase food.
I think the simpler thing would be to reduce or eliminate the sales tax on food. I think that we had troubles with the income tax refund, and there were questions about how many people were in the household, and it's simpler and it's more universal for the state to lower or eliminate it on sales tax, on food. You can't do this in a vacuum, and we all know that the state is basically out of money. And so these are difficult decisions. However, if we have to reopen a conversation on taxes in the next 2 or 3 years, I think it would be a hallmark of my administration that we take a shot at reducing it altogether and finding a way to make it up somewhere else, because there's never a good time to provide tax relief to lower income Kansans that can't fight for it every day up inside the legislature. And there's always excuses on, well, let's do this tax or this element or that element. And sales tax on food always gets pushed to the side. And I think we simply have to make it a priority, get it done, and reduce it, because people would feel it right away. It would be relief that they could feel right away.
Well, certainly you heard me say earlier that I grew up in some very humble beginnings as a young kid, and I understand, the importance of making sure that families get an opportunity to eat. I even understand from the perspective of being a mayor and having to take care of families and trying to figure out how families are going to eat and how children will get that meal before they go to school, and then also what meal they will have that evening. I would definitely make it a top priority to get rid of food sales tax. That way we can provide additional food for those individuals and those families, and so they're not spending those dollars and being able to do that. And certainly, to do that, that's going to require, individuals in communicating to communities how much they're actually paying, so that they can focus on it. But at the legislators, and working with them and saying, okay, these are the things we need to do. Let's find a way to diversify so we can immediately get rid of this sales tax on this food, so that we can start taking care of families.
I voted against taking away the food sales tax deduction. I voted last year to put it back in. I fought hard in the income tax reform package to include that piece. Unfortunately, I was unsuccessful. I was successful in getting the child care credit back in. I was successful in getting the mortgage deduction back in. I was successful in getting the medical deduction back in. We were unsuccessful in that piece, and I was very disappointed in that, and I will continue to fight for that. Second, food sales tax. I voted last year to reduce the food sales tax because I do think it's a terribly bad tax. We are the highest in the country, and that's not where we want to be number one. It hurts everybody, but particularly those on a fixed income, those who are struggling, and those who are trying to move to the next level of life. It's a very bad tax. Now, it would be politically great to stand up and, yeah, we're going to get rid of it. That's why you have cynicism about what we say, because you know Kansas is in a financial crisis, that we made significant progress last year in reestablishing fiscal responsibility. And that's one thing I promised across this state is we are going to continue to be fiscally responsible. I'm sick and tired of the state not being able to pay its bills. I'm sick and tired of reading the newspaper and the bills are much higher than the revenue. I'm sick and tired of the 1% not paying anything and everybody else picking up more. But one of my goals is that when I run for re-election, I stand up here, I can tell you that we've reduced the food sales tax by at least half in my first term. Thank you.
You know, as Jim just said, we do have the highest sales tax in the country on food. That was created when Brownback and Collier cut the taxes for the wealthy, and then the next year kept in place the sales tax that we had put in temporarily during the recession, and we said after 3 years we'll take it back, and we didn't. Brownback and Collier left that in place to pay partially for these income tax cuts that they put in place. On top of that, there has been another whole attack on the poor that has happened in the last 7 years. Some of you may be familiar with the HOPE Act, which we really ought to be calling the Hopeless Act, which has significantly reduced cash benefits that very poor people depend upon just to pay the bills and feed their kids. We reduced child care assistance to our families so that while we push and push and push for them to go to work and be independent, we don't provide them the assistance that they need to do that. We have not expanded Medicaid, so we have not been providing health care for some of our poorest folks here. We're still leaving them in a situation where they go without, or they have to end up in the emergency room, and then the whole rest of us pay for the bill. So we have had a 7-year war on the poor in the state of Kansas. That needs to change. And in my administration, that will be one of the very first things that I focus on. You know, we also have, as you might know, we have the largest number of children in our foster care system ever. We have over 7,300 children in our foster care system. And the reason we have that is because of those tax cuts from 2012 and 2013 that have so decimated our agencies that we no longer have staff who can work to keep them out of that system, and then we no longer have staff who can, when it's time, reintegrate them with either their family or an adopted family. So we have a lot of work to do to help our most vulnerable people.
All right, next question.
Yeah, I've unfortunately got 2 questions. That allows anybody to dodge one.
You can pick one.
But first, I'd like to ask how much you'll be supporting the funding of education. I know, for example, here in Emporia, if ESU were not to get enough funding, not get more funding, then it's been cut, and that means it's going to have to raise tuition, which means it's then less competitive. It's a spiral. Departments are not able to replace faculty that are leaving. And so it's a war of attrition for every department in the university. And if ESU goes down, then the entire city goes down, basically. And this could happen in cities across Kansas. So one, funding for education. Secondly, voter suppression. Who here is willing to say they would support undoing this covert cleansing of the voter rolls? And secondly, work towards a universal registration for voters in the state of Kansas.
So school funding and voter suppression, you still only get 2 minutes. We'll start with, let's start with Mr. Brewer, actually, and then rotate left until we get back to Mr. Ward.
Okay. Addressing the issue on voter suppression. You know, certainly that's one of the things that's very important to me, and you know, I'm very disappointed at the fact that that we're even having that national discussion where they're using intimidation and scaring people away from being able to vote. Every person should have the opportunity to be able to vote. In fact, we should do things and put things in place that require individuals to be able to register to vote and make it easier for individuals. So I'm supportive of it. Secondly, taking it a step farther, and recognizing what's going on. I was one that worked and got 30 mayors to sign off and saying, when Kobach was putting things in place and working with the president, that I ended up working with President Obama and saying, don't do anything that would affect our communities and have these unintended consequences that were going to affect our communities and our families. And then when you start talking about education, I support education. Education is equally important as infrastructure, highways, and airways. You must be able to have, when you determine whether you're going to grow your economy, when businesses are expanding, they're looking at what the future has for them. Is there a skilled workforce? To have a skilled workforce, you must have an educated workforce. And to have an educated workforce, we have to start right there in schools, in K through 12, and educating individuals, whether they're going into technical fields or whether they're going on to higher education. We have to invest and find a way to be able to do that, and making sure that we're preparing these young people to be able to go out into the future. Because they're not competing against individuals that are in the next state over. They're competing with the rest of the world, and it's our responsibilities as families and as parents to prepare them and to get them ready to go out and to compete with the rest of the world. Because if we don't, you're looking for that 1% that's going to be in the low income, they will be there. Because everyone else in every third world country has it figured out that education is number one. And you must invest in it, and they are investing in it.
I think investing in higher education is extremely important. They are economic engines in our communities. They are entrepreneurial by default. Businesses and young people spin out of them and create jobs and businesses generally in that area. They're a valuable resource for the state. The problem is the state is so strapped for cash that the road back from where we have been is going to be long. And the only thing that I can promise, but I think that's what chancellors and presidents and school board superintendents and school boards are asking for, is that when the state makes a commitment in terms of the money that we will give an institution of higher ed or a school, that we keep it and you don't get a mid-year allotment. Because when Emporia really gets strapped or Pittsburgh really gets strapped, it's usually when the state asks for a 4% cut in March, almost at the end of the fiscal year, and there's just no way to address it in their budget with 3 months left in the fiscal year. And it's hard to do. Sometimes you have declining revenue at the state level, but you normally don't have declining revenue as bad as we've had in the last 8 years because of mismanagement at the very top. And so as governor, I would commit that I would set something and commit to it. The other important element to higher education is that we must keep our doors open to international students. They are great for our economies, they're great for our communities, and they are great for the bottom line of our higher ed institutions. And these are sophisticated students that communicate with each other, and they know states that feel closed or places that would feel inappropriate for them being. And they are talking to each other, and we don't want to end up on that list. We don't want to be the next Texas where they say we don't want to go there because there will be a hostile environment. That starts at the gubernatorial level. That starts at setting the tone of our state being an open state. And in 20 seconds left, I'll also say, absolutely, we should make voting easier. We should make registration easier. We have 2 great Democratic candidates running for Secretary of State, and they needed a governor that can help them win in November so we can make that happen.
As Josh said, the culture starts at the top. It starts with the governor, with all the issues. The voter registration issue, voter suppression, as well as just the transparency issue that we've been asked questions about, the whole transparency issue in government. That all starts at the top. That starts with the governor. And the governor can mandate certain things relative to who they put in place as far as who they appoint, making sure that that culture of transparency begins. The next process, of course, has to be with the legislature in order to enact laws that give us more open policies and make it easier for people to register to vote and to be voted. With the technology we have today, it's ridiculous that we can't actually register from our phone. We have voice recognition, we have thumbprint, we have biological recognition, so that's actually better than a photo ID because we actually have biological thumbprinting, so to speak. The education side of the equation, no question. We have to fund education for our future. And yes, there's an issue with the budgetary processes, but the bottom line is that we don't have time nor a population where we can waste and say, well, we'll just have to wait for these kids in this 4 years or this 8 years until we get the money. We lose an entire generation by not properly funding those children. In addition, we really need to go back to the teachers. Being a former teacher myself, teachers are the ones who really know what's needed in the classroom. That needs to go into deciding how the formulary is actually going to work in those systems. And the most important thing is I've already mentioned, and that has to do with the issues of special needs children.
Education funding has been my #1 priority in the 14 years that I have been in the Senate, and will continue right through into my governorship. I'm the architect of the Early Childhood Block Grant that many communities have benefited from. I was able early in my career to get that into the budget and actually get that funded. I also created an after-school grant program that allowed for communities to get money to be able to take care of those kids who were latchkey at those times. During the dark years from 2013 to 2017, I was the only one on the Senate side on the Ways and Means Committee fighting to mitigate the damage to education, particularly higher education. I wasn't able to stop all of it, but trust me, if I hadn't been there, it would have been a lot worse because they had great plans. So you can trust that I will do whatever I can to ensure that we fund our education system from pre-K through post-secondary to the best of our ability, and not just to meet a court order because it's the right thing to do and it makes a huge difference in our economy. And in terms of voter suppression, I think the first thing that I would do as governor would be to introduce a bill that would strip the Secretary of State of prosecutorial powers. We have the only Secretary of State in the country who has prosecutorial powers. He's abused them. We need to remove them so that that can never happen again.
Leadership. Leadership is the most important thing a governor can do. And here are two issues where leadership is vital. Start with voter suppression. We have to end the idea that you have to prove you're a citizen by birth certificates or divorce papers or whatever nonsense. Let's go back to the idea that you'll sign a statement that says, I'm a citizen of the United States, I'm a citizen of the state of Kansas, and if I'm lying, you can charge me with perjury, because I believe 99.9% of people who go vote are honest citizens and they should be allowed. That's not the only cancer. They're making it harder to vote by reducing the number of places you do it. I see a gentleman up here who has a challenge in a wheelchair. We put them in places where you can't get in with the wheelchair, even though we have the Americans with Disabilities Act. As governor, I will shine the spotlight on that and shame the Secretary of State and election commissioners to making voting more easy. It's a foundation of democracy. Education is a huge issue. Your question was addressed about higher education. 3 points. 1, stop taking the money. Stop taking the money whenever they're doing it. Last year it was $25 million. 2, reinvest in higher education. It is a crime that kids are coming out of college with $100,000 debts to start their lives. When I went to school, the state made a bigger investment in higher education, and it did not come out with that kind of debt. And I was able to go to law school, I was able to build a small business, I was able to start a life and raise 2 kids. We need to get back to that attitude that higher education is an investment in the future of Kansas.
I believe we'll take the next question
question, and Mr. Spotty will answer first, and then we'll just keep going back to Mr. Brewer.
I've been to a number of these forums, and I haven't met a politician yet that says they are against education. Even our former governor said he was going to fund more, $600 million. Here's my question, how are you going to do it? I think you all have enough experience that maybe you can give us some specifics, and I know it's early in the campaign and I don't want to get you out on a limb, but boy, I hear a lot of generalities and not a lot of specifics, and I'd like to know how you're going to fund, get more funding for education.
The beauty of this is that it's something of a pass, and I feel sorry for the minority leader and the senator here, because they're going to have to make some hard decisions in the next 2 months on this very question that will really dictate what the next governor is going to have to do. Because the $64,000 question is, how many hundreds of millions really is it? And public education, K through 12, is the single largest part of the state's budget, as it should be. I mean, the state has historically said this is where we want most of our tax dollars to go, and that's great. I think the big challenge of the next governor is balancing that with the very real needs of every other state agency, because we have starved everything. And what I'm telling people out on the stump is it's impossible to say, until the legislature has acted right now to satisfy the courts, it's impossible to say we need $180 million, we need $250 million, exactly how we're going to do it, until they've actually acted. But what we can say is that we have to create a pipeline of young people that are interested in entering the teaching profession as a career again. When we started the school year last year, there were 1,500 teacher vacancies statewide. And that speaks to how far it has fallen. Some of that is salary and straight money, but some of it is the lack of due process. Some of it's a lack of respect from the governor and many members of the legislature, so that young people are saying, this is not a career path that I want to be on anymore. And I would change those on day one in the hopes that I would attract people back in. But I think, to get back into the weeds on school finance, I think largely the 92 school finance formula is the most constitutional form that we're going to have. It's complicated, but it balances things out. And you know this in Lyon County, as well as we did in Ellsworth County. We're largely grassland in Ellsworth County. There is no tax base there. So we're not blessed. Western Ellsworth County has oil wells. They're okay. But Ellsworth County, if you don't have a tax base, you need to be equalized.
I think absolutely, as Josh said, if you look at it, the legislature this session has to make a major change or move because of the Supreme Court. And of course, there is a movement afoot to try to change the Supreme Court. And hopefully that's not going to occur. I think we know where we should not take the money from, because this is not just a question that we're going to have to answer this legislative session. This is a process that we have to address along the way for basically forever, because it's not just education that we have not been funding, it's infrastructure we haven't been funding. It's as well healthcare we have not been funding sufficiently. It's the state retirement program, CAPERS, we have not been funding. So we have a significant state debt. And so like it or not, it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican, like it or not, the state has made commitments. And just like you and I, if we buy a new truck, we have made an agreement to pay for that truck. We have borrowed money, we owe that money. We can't stop halfway in between and say, oh gee, I think we're not going to pay for that anymore. That's called bankruptcy. So places that we cannot take that money or think we're going to get that money are food sales tax, which has been done in the past. Real estate tax, for exactly what Josh was saying. So many areas, particularly in rural areas as well as low socioeconomic areas in the urban areas, they don't have the tax base, and that kills them financially to raise those taxes. So it's going to have to come from income tax, because that is directed more at those who can pay. That's not fun, but we have to meet our obligations.
Well, education funding is by virtue of the Constitution our #1 responsibility in the state of Kansas. And I like nothing better than a wonky question like this one, about how are we actually gonna do it? I've served on the budget committee for 14 years as the ranking minority member. And my plan right now is that we look at our ending balances and that we take from the ending balance an amount of money, at least $100 million for 18 and 19, and we use that to fund education. And then we take some additional funding from those balances, and then we create a trust fund that will fund the third year of the plan. The court will accept nothing less. We cannot give them a plan that does not show how into the future we're going to pay our bills. The other reality is we're in a bit of a conundrum with our finances right now because of the tax cut or the tax restoration that we put into place last year. Long story short, we don't know exactly how much money we're going to have when the fiscal year ends. We also don't know, because of the tax cuts on the federal level, exactly what's going to happen to Kansas. There's some rumor that we will actually benefit from that tax cut, no matter what you think of it. But that may bring in an additional $500 million, which will go a long way to funding our schools. We have a long list of priorities, as others have mentioned. There are a number of things, capers, our social service system, all sorts of things that really do need to be re-resourced. But education will always be at the top of that list, and then as we are able, we will continue on down that list and refund those sources or services.
First, my principles. Every child in Kansas should be able to pursue their God-given talents regardless of where they live or how rich their community is. 2, we have a responsibility to give teachers the tools they need to help those children pursue those God-given talents. I have been privileged. Jerry Carr, anybody remember Jerry Carr, senator from this area? Was the leader of the Senate Democrats when I served in 91 and 92. He was kind enough to let me be in the room and part of the discussion on the finance formula because I had just served on the school board in the largest school district in Kansas, Wichita. I have been privileged to be in the room putting together a bipartisan coalition to fund education the 2 times we've done it right in the last 10 years. And I'm going to use those skills to get it done right this year, okay? And here are the details. We have to build a formula that funds children as they come into school. Every child costs money to educate. Some kids are more expensive. Kids who come from broken families or come from poverty have challenge. They are equally as brilliant as children who don't. They just have different keys to unlock that brilliance, and we need to give school districts the money to do that. We have a lot of kids who show up. We have over 120 languages spoken in our state. We have to teach those kids English first before we teach them math. And that costs more money, and we should do that. And Josh is right. There are districts in this state. I represent a part of Wichita that was built in the early 1940s as temporary housing for the aircraft industry. That's poor. I also have Tallgrass, which is very rich. The kids in Plainview deserve the same opportunities as the kids at Tallgrass, so we need to help Plainview with a little extra money called equalization. But what it does is you raise the property taxes to this level, and we'll help make your property taxes better. Those are the principles that I will take into the room and get school finance done.
You heard the individuals up here made some very, very good points. And certainly Jim represents an area. I've had the entire city of Wichita, which is the largest school district in the state of Kansas. And I've had an opportunity, with a number of children. You heard me say I had 13 grandchildren that attend public school. And with all of them, I have an opportunity to visit with these various different schools and these various different teachers and also with the parents, and certainly recognize the challenges that they're actually having. Yes, during this legislative session, they have some complications. One, we never should have gotten into a predicament where the courts are dictating to us what we should be doing, investing in schools, because we didn't do it. And that there has to do with our leadership and starting with leadership. They took a wrong approach. And then there should have been a much stronger fight. Those are our children. Those are the kids in our communities. And we owe them an opportunity to have an education. We owe the teachers the opportunity to be able to have all the right tools to be able to teach them. There's going to be some serious challenges. And certainly we're going to have to go in and we're going to have to find ways to be able to come up with additional funding to be able to do it. Whether it's diversifying our economy that we have here in the state of Kansas, or what we may have in the agricultural industries, and getting other things that we can actually sell and we can export to other countries. Finding other ways to be able to meet the needs, to be able to pay for education. But not only that, as they figure out what they're going to do, whether it's going to be that $600 million or whether it's going to be that $800 million that they're going to be providing to schools, they've got to give that money back that they borrowed and they took from capers and from the teachers and the state employees and retirement. If you and I did that, they would say that we are poor money managers. And if we did that in our homes, we have to turn around and we have to lead by example. And under my administration, that's the way it's going to be. But the other portion is you, my employer, will know what we're doing and how we're doing it and whether we're making progress and paying off our bills.
Hi, Mr. Brewer. Do you have another question from the audience? What, you got it covered? Victoria? You were there. I believe we start with Senator Kelly this time.
Okay, so a couple of years ago, I saw Governor Brownback speak whenever he visited Emporia at Dynamic Discs. And he was presented with the question of how do we, as in like a rural county like Lyon County, retain our young people after they graduate from college. And his response was, what we need to do is not create more jobs for them here, but rather we need more affordable housing opportunities. So I present that question to you. How would we retain our young people?
Well, if you don't have a job, you can't afford any house, so I'd say it's probably just a little backwards. You know, clearly when our kids are getting out of high school or college, they're looking for a job. So if there are no jobs in your community, they will go elsewhere. So it is all about jobs. You know, with the jobs, then you can worry about the housing, you know, and that will grow as people are moving into the community. So I think it's absolutely got to be about jobs. And I think that's why I've invested a lot of energy in developing not only the higher education curriculum, but our technical education, so that when we're graduating kids, they have an opportunity, you know, to have a real skill, marketable skill that they can translate right into a job. Now, in order for us to have those jobs in the community, though, obviously we have to be able to attract businesses to come to a community. I think the state has a responsibility to partner with our local communities to make that happen. You know, clearly, your community needs to come together, but we really need to be helping. And I think what we've done over the past 7 years has made Kansas a relatively unattractive place to be. You know, when we have underfunded our higher education program, our K-12 program, you know, we're not preparing the workforce. When businesses are looking for places to relocate, they look at things like quality of life, and transportation, infrastructure, and all those kinds of things. But first and foremost, what they must have in order to produce is a trained workforce. And then we need to have a workforce that is nimble enough to be retrained as businesses change the way they do business. So it's all about that. Really is all about making sure that our higher education is producing the workers that folks need, and that our kids are getting into those programs, businesses are coming into the community, and the kids can take those jobs when they graduate.
This one's personal. My daughter just took a job, she's 25 years old, in Denver, Colorado. She didn't choose Kansas, not that she didn't try. So this one's personal, and we can do a better job. And it requires about 3 or 4 things. First of all, we need that partnership between business and academics and labor to talk about what it takes to get that strong, qualified workforce. A governor can be part of that process. We need to ask business, what do you need for your employees? What I'm hearing, talking to large and small and medium sized, is I need kids who are ready to go to work on day one. I spend too much time retraining or giving them skills that I thought they should have got somewhere else. 2, and you guys are way better at it than we were, is the ability to change so quickly. I have to tell a quick anecdote. My first class in my first year, on my first day, was a computer class. Okay? Now I thought these computers might be something and I should learn something about them. And this was 1977. The computer was about from this wall to that door, and you put those little punch cards in. Now my entire life is run on a machine the size of a playing game. Okay? And you all are way better at making that change, and we need to continue to promote those kinds of things. Second, it is wrong that there are large areas of this state that don't have fast broadband. And you say, well, that's Netflix. How does that work? It's not. I'm a lawyer. I can't take legal papers to the courthouse anymore. It's all done online. We have to invest in broadband everywhere fast. 2, highway plan. We've taken all the money for 5 or 6 years, and we can't have an infrastructure that's wrong. That bad roads and bad bridges, and that's money, people building them, but also how we move goods and services around. 3, not in order of importance, but we need to continue to invest in education. Not just K-12 and colleges, but technical schools, retraining schools, and opportunities to get credentialing quicker. Those are the kinds of things that make Kansas an attractive place to get a job.
Well, that's a very good question that you presented, and I say that because when I first was elected mayor, that was one of the things that I had to address in the city of Wichita. Elected mayor 2007, 2008, we went into the Great Recession, worst recession in the history of this country. And so one of the things that we were actually doing is parents were saying, how do we stop the brain drain? My children are not wanting to go to college here, or those that are going to college here don't want to stay here. So how do we go ahead and we keep them here? And the one thing that I end up getting out of it is, one, I brought them all to the table and I sat down with them and I said, what is it that you would like to have? Because this community, this city, belonged to you. They wanted an opportunity to be at the table to define what the vision was and then to work to be able to get there. And that was what I did. And we reduced the amount of brain drain that we had. But interestingly enough, we brought in an environment where individuals, they seen that they wanted an opportunity where they could, a place where they could live, and they could work, and they could entertain themselves, and they could do all that. They wanted things that were totally different from the generations before. We gave them that opportunity to do that. And we gave them the opportunity to be able to define and to build their communities the way that they wanted them to do. And we were able to change that. But you certainly, I will tell you that the previous governor and his conversation is to provide them with an opportunity to have a house. The senator's correct. You're not going to get a house if you don't have a job. So create an environment where they can have a good job, where they're making a livable wage, and they can have the quality of life that they choose to have. And the only way you're going to do that is give them an opportunity to be at the table and to make decisions and to define what it is that they would like and to move them forward.
Just quickly, you have to invest as a state in research at your institutions of higher education. Those spin out entrepreneurial activity. You look at even businesses like Surefire Ag and Atwood, which my fellow candidates are probably sick of me referencing them all the time, but they were K-Staters. They came out of K-State, they went back home, they built a business there because they were inspired to do that after going to college at K-State. We have to invest in higher ed. But there's something bigger going on. Millennials don't get a job and move to the town. Millennials move to the town they want to move to and then look for work. And it's a shift. And we have to make ourselves a state that people are willing to move to. And part of that's creating a vibe in the broader Kansas City area or the Wichita area. But I think one of the areas in Kansas that we can really sell ourselves, particularly in rural areas, we have wide open space. And Emporia is actually doing that really well. What's the coolest ticket in Emporia? The Dirty Kansas. Everybody's talking about it. And it's spun out businesses on your downtown Main Street. It's creating exactly what we would want to see. One of the greatest museums in the state of Kansas is the brand new one out at Fort Wallace. And it's beautiful. It's on the Smoky Hill River. It's out in River Valley. It's out in Wallace County. But it's wide open space. And everybody loves to go to the mountains. But anymore, when you go to the mountains, you're there with tens of thousands of other people. If you want a true natural experience, Kansas has something to offer. But did you know we are dead last in publicly available space? Our millennials are looking for communities where they can work, but they can also be outside and recreate inside nature, be with nature, Kansas has to give them something, or we're going to continue losing it.
Well, I think most everyone understands that if you're going to rent, purchase, or build a home, you have to have the income to do that. And I have a stepdaughter who's in Colorado, just like Jim, left Kansas. She's 27. And part of that decision, though, for her was she wanted to go to Colorado. She wanted to be in the mountains and so on. Because as a child, she would go there skiing and so on. But the bottom line is, I think, regardless what state you're going to live in, you go to that state for a reason. And it's just like Josh is talking about. That may be family, and the reason I came to Kansas is because I married a wonderful Kansas lady and moved here, and then got a job. But the thing about it is you have to have a reason to want to go to that state. There has to be something that attracts you, or if you're already here, there has to be something to keep you here. That may be family, that might be outdoors, that might be some other issue. But your overall quality of life is what's going to keep you here. You may come for a while. If you don't find a job, you're not going to stay very long because you can't live there. But also, you want a quality health care system. You want an educational system that either you or your children are going to be able to thrive in. You want public safety. You want an infrastructure for roads and bridges that are going to be safe for you to be on. All of those things come into your decision-making process of, am I going to stay here? And so absolutely, you have to have a job in order to be able to buy the house. But if you had a little money when you came, you won't stay unless you can find that job and do find the overall quality of life in that area to be suitable for what you want.
All right, we will have one more question from the audience, and then it's okay, you can talk to them afterwards. One more question from the audience, and then there'll be a question from the moderator.
Okay, so I have a very specific personal question. My husband and I are foster parents. And so our state foster care system is in an abysmal state. So what would you specifically do to not only increase the number of foster homes available and keep the foster kids out of sleeping in offices, and to fix the foster care system as a whole?
We can start with Ms. Brewer.
Somehow I knew that was coming toward me. But, you know, the foster care system is broken in Kansas. And there is no reason that, you know, we have 70-something children that are sitting out there that we have no idea where they're at. That's unexcusable. And certainly we should be holding somebody accountable for that. In fact, you know, a little sensitive because of the fact that, you know, behind my home, there's a situation that's been going on, and they've been searching for this 5-year-old behind my house. It just happened to be right there where I'm at. So I've been seeing this for the past few days, and as I'm driving home each day. We have to do something that's different than what we've been done in the past. And we have actually taken the foster care system, created an environment where individuals are using it as a business. And they try to get the number of children so that they can generate revenue. Well, that's fine as long as they're making sure that these children have adequate homes and that they're taken care of and they're getting an education and they're treating them in a family environment as opposed to putting them in a home and just leaving them there. I think we need to come up with a more clarifying decision as to how we're actually going to do this. But then, if children don't come to school, that within a certain period of time, when I say a certain period of time, I mean hours, it's reported to someone, and we know exactly where these children are at, and we're out searching for them. We're trying to find them. But taking it a step further, we need to have adequate trained individuals that are managing these individuals, whether it be in DCF, or whether it be our court systems, whether it be our legal system, individuals that know exactly what's going on, and we have a process that we can track and we can monitor exactly what's going on and what's happening. But in Kansas, we have a lot of problems that have to do with our children, and we aren't taking the necessary action to be able to fix that, and we need to make that a priority.
One, you have to appoint a secretary that would manage that agency well. Two, you have to begin to undo and rebuild CanCare, the method by which we administer not only foster care, but frankly, every vital program for children in need, or families in need, or low-income individuals, or disability individuals. Our system that was intended to be and sold to us as a program that would be more efficient has created nothing but more problems and has been more expensive for us as a state. But then finally, I think this speaks to the broader problem that we have lived through over the last 7 years. And I know this because I did run a state agency. I was Ag Secretary. Our government is only as good as the people making that government work. And a small portion of that is legislators. The real work of government is mostly done by the civil servants who come to work every single day and make it happen. And I share this anecdote. Our Department of Revenue is currently meeting at an abandoned grocery store on 29th and Topeka. It's got about 6 windows this big. Imagine trying to attract a 23-year-old with talent and say, hey, would you come like to work for us in this abandoned grocery store while we suck the life out of you for the next 35 years, and you may or may not have a pension? Because that's what the state is saying, and that's the kind of talent we can attract. And when it's revenue, and when it's transportation, that means the services at those agencies go down. The tragedy is when it's DCF, it means children's lives are impacted.
I have a number of foster care parents in my practice and a number of children that are foster care in my practice. So I see that directly. And as Josh said, you have to start at the top again. And the governor appoints the director of that agency. And you have to have someone who can operate that agency and actually can hire people themselves that will follow through with an appropriate management. At the same time, one thing that is not allowed here, because part of the question was, how do you increase the number of facilities? The state currently does not allow people to have 2 licenses. So you can't be a daycare provider and as well as a foster care provider. Not to say that all of them can, but daycare providers are trained well. They have emergency training, ACL or BLS, as well as they are highly inspected. There are a number of daycare providers that would also make and want to be very good foster care parents. Now that doesn't say that there's a lot of them out there, but there are some. Now you can always find an anecdotal, oh no, that's not going to work. But I have a few that are. I have a few that aren't as well. So we have to have those people that, one, are skilled and 2, are qualified. And so part of our qualification for foster care parents also needs some of that equivalent training. They need some emergency medicine training. They need to be able to understand special needs in children. They need to be able to understand when it is a problem, they need to get help. And, of course, we have to have an agency that can inspect them, that can track that whole process.
Just a little history here. Our foster care system was privatized back in the 90s. We were actually under court order from the feds to do something. And so Governor Graves at that time decided that what they would do, they would privatize it and really outsource it to contractors to provide those services. But what Governor Graves also did was he put in place in the agency the ability to oversee those contractors so that the services that they said they would deliver, they delivered. Over time, and particularly in the last 7 years, we have under-resourced that agency so that they no longer provide the oversight that they need to those contractors. The other thing is given the leadership that we've had in that agency over the past 7 years, every person with any experience fled that agency or was fired. So we were left with people who had no idea what they were doing and really didn't care. You know, that wasn't a prerequisite to actually care about these kids to get a job there. So the legislature recognized that we had a serious issue. Last year we created what we called the Child Welfare Task Force. We gave it until next January to come up with a plan to fix our foster care system. Fortunately, the past secretary resigned, given that many of the things that are happening in the foster care system were exposed, and she was sort of forced to retire. We have a new person in there in the secretary position now who actually does know what she's doing and is committed to doing it. So instead of waiting until 2019 for final recommendations, we're actually working with her now to implement some things that can be done without statutory change. And I will say that she is working on it. Now, continues to be under-resourced, there's no doubt about that, but she has put in a request for more funding to hire more social workers, more caseworkers. You know, the secretary before that never asked for a nickel.
I want to start mine by saying, sir, I appreciate the way you talk about that question, knowing how your family's impacted and the way you're able to. I'd have a hard time talking, let alone you do it so intelligently. Thank you for that. I've had the privilege in my other life, I'm an attorney, and I've spent a lot of time in juvenile court. I've been the prosecutor, I've been a guardian ad litem, I've represented parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles and siblings. I know when it works, and I know when it doesn't work. And I knew it wasn't working 3 years ago when I was reading in the paper about children being murdered while in custody. Remember the story about the little boy who was chopped up into pieces and thrown into the pig pen? I found out that DCF had over 7 intakes that the child was in danger. So I did the only thing I could do in July of 2015. I went to the post office and said, do something. Let's find out what's going on over at that agency. Let's know what's going on so we can take action in January when the legislature comes back. They said, no, let's think about it. And they continued it to December. What happened between July and December is we found out that they were discriminating against same-sex couples. There was a beautiful family in Wichita taking care of a little girl for 4 years since she was born. They ripped her out of that home, shipped her to Topeka to that city councilman who had 25 kids and was abusing them. And finally they said, okay, we'll give you part of your audit. And we as House Democrats wouldn't sign that tax plan until they agreed to have a DCS task force to oversee what's going on. And that's how we discovered that they lost 80 kids. And now we are actually taking steps because the legislature finally got off its duff. And that's what I can do as governor, is that I'll be pushing the legislature to get off their duff and make sure the money's there. Because the question was, what can you do? We need to invest so we can hire more social workers. We need to have more contractors so that we can get the services out all over the state. We need a governor who cares about those children.
All right, I want to thank everybody for coming here, but I'm going to ask a question now as chair and moderator because I can do that. My question for all of you, and we'll start with Mr. Spotty since he would have been after Mr. Brewer. I want you to pretend for a second that you make it through the primary, you make it through the general election, and you're the governor of the state of Kansas. Let's assume that you've got one magic wish, okay? You have one bill or policy idea you can make into law. Let's not be practical and assume you've got to put it through the legislature and tacked up by committee. You have one wish that you can use to make one change that you think is important into the law of the state of Kansas. What would that one change, that one policy, that one bill be?
We've had a similar question at other forums, and I've said I would do, on day one, there's 2 things. We have to, as a state, reinstate our civil protections for LGBT state employees. One, because it's the right thing to do for them. But 2, and the reason I say that is it sends an immediate message both to everyone inside the state and then everyone outside of the state that the state that thought to be free is back. The state that gave women the right to vote a long time before the rest of the country is back. The state that gave us Brown versus Board of Education is back. It's an immediate message. The second sort of magic wand question or thing would be a dedicated revenue source for our natural resources. We have a state water plan fund that's actually pretty good, except it's a state water plan. It's not a fund. There's no money there. And when we start talking about 50 to 100 years out and long-term economic development, if our state government is not focused on our natural resources, we risk large swaths of our economy in this state because it's built primarily on water. And then frankly, soil is critical to everything. And so the state has to be focused on it. And if we keep kicking this can down the road, it's similar to sales tax on food. Well, now's not a good time. Now's not a good time. We have to have a dedicated revenue source. And in a Magic Wand environment, it would happen on day one.
Well, as a physician, I would have to say overhauling Medicaid and the healthcare system would be the one wish. We only have so much money. And we have currently $3.3 billion in the Medicaid fund. We can double the number of people under that fund with an appropriate overhaul. We already spend more money than any other country in the world, 2 to 3 times most of the countries in the world on health care. We do not get 2 to 3 times the quality of health care in this country. One of the major reasons is because it's been privatized in the state. And so what happens is private industry pulls off the public dollars. It's the same thing relative to drugs, the same thing relative to labs, and as well as x-rays and radiology things. So we can overhaul that. By overhauling the healthcare system, we put people at ease, we improve their health, we help the job situation throughout the state, we help the rural and inner city communities and those small clinics and hospitals. We help everyone, as well as we make it so people are healthier, young people, they can go to school, they can learn. Because part of that healthcare overhaul is we have to address this issue of this increasing level of autism, of ADHD, of special need learning problems in our population. We can change that. We have to change that. And that's an overhaul of the medical system in order to do that.
Thank you. Well, the very first thing I would do as governor would be to go buy a big barrel of ink and fill up my veto pen. And then I would veto every law that the legislature passes that is unconstitutional. And it's cost us millions of dollars taking to court. You know, you can look at our voter suppression laws that we've been taken to court on. You can look at the laws that we passed to reduce women's right to choose. And you can look at our unconstitutional education funding. Those bills would not get past my desk.
This is magic. It doesn't have to be magic. It doesn't have to be a maybe or if I had magic powers. On my first day, I am going to hire people committed to the agencies, whether it be DCF, or it be the Department of Health and Environment, or our Medicaid director, or the people who work at the Kansas Corporation Commission, that they will not be protecting the big utility companies, but trying to drive down our utility rates and make it more affordable for us to live. I will have good people committed, Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, non-voters, but the standard to work in the ward administration is talent and commitment. That doesn't need magic. Second of all, I will be issuing an executive order restoring the prohibition against discrimination against same-sex couples in state government, period. I'm going to introduce a bill to make sure that's put in the law book so that the next governor, if we should make a wrong turn to the right after my 8 years, won't be able to repeal it without going through. I would, and if I could have a magic power, I would have all of the bad laws that were passed restricting women's right to choose off the books, restricting abilities to do school funding the right way, off the books. All those things. We just passed a telemedicine bill where we said in the House, despite our attempt, that we're not going to help disabled kids in school with telemedicine. Why? Because the insurance industry didn't want to do it. Those kinds of things wouldn't happen if I had a magic wand for 4 years, 8 years. Thank you.
Well, if I had a magic wand, certainly everything that everyone has presented here has some wonderful ideas and would be beneficial to the state of Kansas. But I would say that the first thing I would do is make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be at the table and that they're not discriminated or harassed in any way. And we have a problem with that. You know, some of our thinking and our logic and things that are back there, the discussion is happening right now today, is something that in corporate America this was addressed back in the 80s. And we're having a discussion today and individuals saying, well, I didn't know. We make sure that individuals had the right to vote and we wouldn't intimidate individuals. We wouldn't be like you have some places in western Kansas where there's only one location for individuals to go vote and oh, by the way, it's at the country club. And the demographics show that the individuals there is 70% Latino. I would make sure that everyone had an opportunity the exact same way I did when I was mayor, that everyone was at the table. And not only that, but we have a complete audit as to what do we have, how much revenue do we have coming in, and you would know on a regular basis as to exactly what that total dollar figure is going to be and how we're going to pay for something, as opposed to whenever we get around to it or we hit some of those savings that actually are generated when we turn around and we bring them back. You're going to know what that is and you're going to be able to track it. But have a complete independent outside audit to come in and to be able to audit us. But the only way we can do that is, one, we have to have the right people, we have to have smart people in place that represent. And not only that, but you have to have a governor that leads by example. And that's what you're going to get with me. From coming from corporate America, from being a former mayor, and from serving in the military, I understand that you have to lead by example.
I think now we'll begin with closing remarks, which will last 3 minutes for each candidate. And Dr. Anderson, we'll begin with you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming here today. It really has been a pleasure to meet well, most of you. I haven't met every one of you, but I've met most of you. I think the thing about it is that back on why did I run, why am I running for governor? And that is because I actually have novel solutions. I know how to fix healthcare. Healthcare is the #1 issue in the United States, not just in Kansas. It's the #1 issue in the United States. I know how to fix it. I know how to fix it here so that everybody can get healthcare and we can get it done in a Republican state. I also know how to address the education side of the equation. I know the importance of education. I have 4 degrees. My father barely graduated from high school because he couldn't read. My grandfather never got past the 2nd grade because he couldn't speak English. I know how important education is. I also, as a physician, know if we don't change what's going on with our children, we're not going to be able to educate them. All you need to do is look at the statistics of the problem trend in the disabilities, in the learning problems, in the autism rates in the last 20 years. We have to address the underlying causes, or that in and of itself will bankrupt the state. That's also part of the environmental issue. Josh talked about, well, we need to fund issues with our natural resources. No, we actually need to get technology out there. I've been teaching it for 30 years. We have to change how agriculture is done so that we can get the profitability back on the farm. We, by default, address then the natural resources, and by default, we address one of the major sources for the chemicals that are causing endocrine disrupting problems in our children. learning disabilities and neurological problems in our children and our adults. And we sequester carbon and automatically then increase our water holding capacity in the soils, which allows us then not to have to use as much water to get higher crop yields. We have proven that already. I was raised on a small dairy farm in Michigan. I know what it's like to pitch manure with a fork. I know what it's like to bale hay by hand in the hot summer heat. The governor doesn't have the opportunity to just represent one group of people. I represent all groups of people, regardless of their gender, regardless of their economy, regardless of their profession.
Time, Mr. Anderson. Thank you.
Well, first, I'd really like to thank Jeremy and Lyon County Democrats of the Emporia State, and actually all of my the other candidates at the table here for showing up to what turned out to be a rather robust debate. You know, we know for the last 7 years that the state of Kansas has been facing a number of challenges. You know, but let's remember our state motto, ad aspera per aspera, to the stars through difficulty. We can meet those challenges, but we need a governor who is battle tested and who can get to work on day one. And for the past 7 years, I've been in the trenches on the front line fighting back against the policies that have hurt Kansas so much, our most vulnerable, our education system, and just our families in general. I will go in as governor with all of those things as my first priority, that we fund our education system and that we take care of our families, and that we put Kansans first, not our own personal ideological things. We also need a governor who thinks long-term. You know, too many politicians think in terms of election cycles. You can't run a state like that. Things won't be successful. We really need somebody who will be thinking about the future too, who will be worrying about reinstating our transportation program, who will be worried about our water issues that are so affecting our central Kansas and our western Kansas. And we need a governor who will represent all Kansans. We found that this bipartisanship, the divide that is so Washington, D.C. does not work here, and we need to bring all people together. You know, in his last 14 years, I've really built a reputation as a leader who does reach across the aisle and work with parties, all parties, everything, and gets things done, and I will take that into the governor's office. And then lastly, maybe personally, we need a governor who will give women a seat at the table. You know, for too long, women have not been heard. That's why we passed some of the bills that we have done. We need to make sure that their voices are heard, and you need a candidate who has consistently voted for the issues that matter most to women. I want to be your governor. I think I'm uniquely qualified to be your governor. I've got the experience, I've got the knowledge, I've got the skill set, I've got the temperament, and I've got the relationships to get into that office on day one and start fixing Kansas. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you very much.
I also want to thank the moderator and also the timekeeper. You did an awesome job of keeping this moving. Give them a hand. That's a hard job. We like to talk. Thank all of you for coming. I appreciate you on a Saturday morning. This is the kind of energy that gives us the chance to be successful in November. Remember, the stakes have never been higher than they are this election. Somebody up here mentioned the dark years that we're in right now, Brownback and Collier. We are in the apocalypse years if Chris Kobach is elected the governor of this state. Chris Kobach was at a forum just like this last Saturday. He said, I'm planting my flag as an ultra-conservative, and I will fight anybody who challenges that. That's why you should vote for me. If you want any of these weak people who will work and compromise and build coalition, you don't vote for them. Vote for them, because I am a true conservative. And that means voter suppression. That means no money for schools. That means no money for higher education. That means more ideas that poor people are poor because it's their own dang fault and they don't need any of our help. We can do better than that in Kansas. And that is vital as you go to pick a Democrat nominee. When I was on city council, we talked to people about moving to Wichita, building their businesses in Wichita. They said there are 3 things that are important. I think these things are still true as we build Kansas. 1, what kind of school system do you have? How good are your schools? Because that's where my kids are going to go. 2, how safe are your streets? I'm a former prosecutor. I get that. I understand when law enforcement does well and when they need to be reined in. I have that talent. 3rd, what kind of culture? Because we don't just work every day. We want to have some culture. What do you do first of all, how do you treat people? All people. That's why the importance of reversing the discrimination against same-sex couples, transgender couples, and women, including them all in this process. We don't have people to waste. We're competing in a global economy, and that's sometimes scary because we seem to think we can leave people behind. We can't. And as governor, I won't. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, who has a track record of using and advocating and voting for and forcing votes on democratic options to policies? Who led the charge that started the DCF change? Who forced the votes on college campuses? Who refused to sign the tax plan until they put in the child care credit and the mortgage deduction and created the DCF oversight and put together the Mental Health Institute and got guns out of mental hospitals? I don't just say it when I'm running. I don't just say it with my vote. I'm out front saying it is the best path for Kansas. And it's that kind of strength, that kind of leadership that will beat Chris Kobach and lead this state into a brighter future.
Well, again, let me thank you for hosting this event and having us here to join you today. What I'll tell you is I've had an opportunity to represent you, from the Kansas League of Municipalities, every city around this entire state, and served on national boards and serving communities. And during the worst recession in the history of this country, my job was to go out and to try to work to bring new opportunities to not just to the city of Wichita, but to communities throughout the entire state of Kansas, whether it's in rural Kansas, in western Kansas, or in southeast Kansas. The thing is every community is important, and everyone should have an opportunity to be at the table, and everyone should be represented, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with them. And in my particular case, I've demonstrated that I have that experience, and I have that knowledge, and I have done that. I have a track record of demonstrating that, 1, I can get individuals to work across the aisle. Secondly, I'm the guy that believes that at the very top is where it starts, that it's your responsibility to connect the dots for the average citizen, for those that don't understand it, and understand how things are going to affect them, whether it be positively or whether it be negatively. But then when it goes south, don't do like the previous governor and say that it's not happening. Stand up and say, this is wrong, it's broken, and oh, by the way, legislators, we're gonna fix this. That's what you're needing in leadership. And that's what we have not had in the state of Kansas. And I can assure you that with me, that is what you're going to get. I did it when I served as mayor. I do it as a family man. And I can assure you that I'll do it as governor of the state of Kansas. So I encourage you, think about what the needs are and everything that you're wanting, because I'm smart enough to know that I don't have all the answers. But there are a lot of people out here and out there that are smart, and collectively we can solve a lot of the problems that we have here in the state of Kansas. But on that one note, I ask that you keep me in mind as next governor of the state of Kansas. But secondly, for the benefit of Kansas, I challenge each and every one of you, go register one person every day to go vote. Because if we don't go vote, it's not going to matter. This is our opportunity to bring about change. Let's not waste it.
I want to thank everybody for coming out. I thank you for hosting. Quick housekeeping thing. We launched our new website this week, joshuaswati.com. We have a full listing of our issues. It's not exhaustive. If you get on there and you're like, hey, wait a minute, you don't speak to this, just shoot us a note and ask me. I'm happy to talk to you about it. But I encourage you to go visit. check us out, see what you think. This is an important election cycle, and I must say, I am proud to be standing up here with my fellow Democrats. We are articulate, we fight and champion people who would otherwise not have a voice. But only one of us wins the primary, and only one of us will potentially go on to win the general. This is a generational election. People are tired of the status quo and they want something new. You can sense it. And what I offer you as a Democrat is that, and Jack Bergeson's not here to throw my age off, I'm actually the youngest up here, and I'm the only Democratic candidate that's been both a legislator and an administrator. I won 4 races in a Republican district in central Kansas. I went on to be State Secretary of Agriculture. I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency, and trust me, I know the Republicans are coming like a freight train because I did it, but I'm proud of that service. And then I went on to work for one of the most forward-thinking agricultural nonprofits on the planet, the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas. But I built my farm. And I'll close with this. I offer us the chance to do something special as Democrats that we've not been doing statewide. Compete. And I ask for your help in Lyon County. Take the energy that you have and extend it to places west of here with me. I will go there with you. I've gone there already. And finally, I'll share my final anecdote. My wife and I have 4 kids. The first and the third were born on the same day by accident, March 7th. Their birthdays are coming up. The second and the fourth were born on the same day by accident, October 3rd. And as I tell people, if my wife and I could be that efficient when we're not even trying, just imagine what we can do when we put our minds to fixing the state of Kansas. Thank you very much. I'm Joshua Slaughter. I appreciate your help.
All right, folks, that brings our event to the close. I just want to thank all of you for coming today, taking time out of your weekend. I want to thank each of our candidates, Senator Kelly, House Minority Leader Jim Moore, Carl Brewer of Wichita, Joshua Spotty, and Dr. Arden Anderson. Whoever is our nominee for governor, I am going to be very, very proud to support and vote in champion them. Thank you all very much. The Lyon County Democrats will meet next on the 12th of March at 6:30 p.m. in the courthouse annex. If you want